Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, From the Depths of Darkness to the Light of Success. I am your host, Chris Swick, and on this podcast, we talk about mental health, addictions, eating disorders, and ADHD, and really anything anyone's afraid to talk about, we talk about it on the show. I believe everyone's story is valuable at the end of the day. Doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. You're all welcome on this platform. We're here to learn from one another and help one another grow. I would love if you could head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave a review, hit that 5 stars if you really helps the show grow. With no further ado, I would love to introduce you to my next guest from New York State. We got Chelsea Pegues. And if I butchered all good, she's also the host of the Stiicky Eddie Podcast, which is an amazing show that I've been on. So head over to Spotify and follow that show. Head over to YouTube if she has it on there. I don't know. Head over to Instagram and follow the Stiicky Eddie Podcast, though, everyone. You want to take it away and let them know a little bit about you, Chelsea?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. I have to say, it's only fair that you butcher my last name because when you were a guest on my show, I butchered the name of your so we're 1 for 1. It's Pegues. I'm Chelsea.
Pegues.
Nice to meet you all. I am not on YouTube as of yet, but I'm pretty much everywhere else. I'm very camera shy. There's no way that I could be camera ready always.
Show then if you don't want to be on camera.
No, I'm good today. So again, my name is Chelsea, and the Stiicky Eddie podcast was started in memory of my late father, Eddie. He was a professional drummer in life, and so hence the name Sticky is what he called himself professionally to represent to drumsticks. Sadly, my dad suffered with addiction to alcohol for most of his 69 years, and that is what eventually took his life unexpectedly. However, on December 23rd of 2020, we found out that he was gone. He suffered a GI bleed from cirrhosis of the liver and passed away from that. And ever since then, I've just been reeling from the loss and raring to go, just looking to learn anything and everything that I can about addiction and what makes people who suffer in this way tick, and how we as loved ones and friends and family, coworkers, anybody on the outside can just be there, can support and help. Because my dad was my best friend, but I think during his lifetime, the one thing I did wrong was one of the many things I did wrong was lead with judgment rather than love all of the time, because I just didn't understand. So the focus of the show is to understand more and spread the education and help break the stigma.
And I appreciate you starting that show and willing to learn what makes people like myself with a past of addictions and alcoholism and stuff like that tick. It's nice. Instead of coming from a place of judgment, you're coming from a place of love and compassion now, which is amazing. What was it like losing your father to alcoholism back in 2020? What were some of the thoughts and feelings going through Chelsea?
Oh my God. 2020, we were all there. We all survived. We're still trying. So we know that it was a very dark, depressing time. And this was December 2020. So we were just wrapping up our first year of the pandemic. My dad and I, like I mentioned, were best friends. We were extremely close. My son, his grandson, was his biggest fan. We were just all always together. And so when the pandemic first took hold and we had to separate ourselves, it was just devastating for my dad. He was a very social creature, as I've noticed that most people who suffer with addictions are. And he needed the interaction. So over the summer was wonderful. We were able to gather outside and it was a little bit safer. And I saw him gaining a little bit of a foothold again. But as the fall came and we couldn't get together for Thanksgiving, and it just started crushing his spirit. And I saw him slipping backward into drinking more and just really succumbing to this addiction 1,000%. I knew that he was suffering. I knew that he was wholly immersing himself in gallon bottles of Macallan scotch every other day. Toward the end of his life, that's what he was doing. And it was for depression. It was to numb the depression of not being able to see everybody. And I was angry, Chris. I was just so pissed off My life with my dad was a roller coaster because of his addiction and because of the fact that I hated when it would rob me of the person that I knew he was inside without the alcohol. So I was angry, honestly, and I was avoiding him toward the end. We used to talk on the phone every day, and I hadn't called him in days. The last time I spoke with him was a couple of days before he passed, and it was a 3-second conversation pretty much. It was just, "Hey, how are you doing? You're okay? Great." He started getting a little bit obnoxious, and I just cut it off at the head, and I was like, "Listen, Dad, I gotta go. I have stuff to do today, but I love you and have a good day." And he said, "I love you too, kiddo." And that was it. And I didn't speak to him again. And the morning of the 23rd, my mom called me and said my parents were divorced. They didn't live together, but she called me and said she had heard from a neighbor. Nobody had seen him in about 3 days, which was very unusual. And now there was an odor coming from the hallway of his apartment. I called the police so that they could do a wellness check because I live about 30 minutes south of my parents. So I wasn't able to get there right away. And when I didn't hear back from the police in a timely manner, I didn't even wait for their call back. I just knew. I got in the car and I was about halfway down the highway doing about 95. And my husband called me and told me and confirmed what I already knew. And I just started screaming, and I didn't stop screaming until I reached his front door.
It must have been like just anger, hurt,
Yeah.
guilt, shame, like probably all the above and then some going through you, Chelsea. And I can't, imagine that on anyone. Not that I haven't lost a family member to something like that, but I've lost family members over the time. I've lost tons of friends. Like it just, I can't even count, especially through this pandemic, how many people I've lost that I've known over the years. I distanced myself from these people because I needed to get better and I couldn't be around those things, but it's really sad when I hear that passed away or so and so passed
Yeah.
away. It's just crazy the way it's another epidemic in itself out there with addictions, mental health, mental illness. And we need more, funding from the government, services and stuff like that. They're not readily available. Not sorry, I'll take that back. They are readily available, but if you can pay for them, if you
Yeah.
can afford them, that's the
Exactly.
thing. And not everyone can afford treatment or get on the waiting list for a government-run treatment center. It's crazy long lineups and stuff like that, as I found out when I got clean and sober the last time too. And we
Yeah.
just need more services out there that help others or funding and stuff like that too.
Guilt and shame, absolutely. That's what I led with in the week of losing him. That's what I lead with now, honestly. It's guilt is sadly my motivation because my dad was not abusive. He wasn't a mean alcoholic. He just had a lot of trauma in his life that perhaps we weren't even privy to. He was such a gregarious, loving, enthusiastic person. But for whatever reason, he just needed to numb this pain that he felt. And he liked the sensation that drinking gave him. He appreciated the detachment. It put him in some sort of a zone. And so we were able always to be friends throughout my entire life. And he was the best dad on the planet. And so guilt is definitely the reason why I started investigating more and saying to myself, this can't be right. No other little girl or little boy or no person, no child out there deserves to grow up this way and become so attached to a human being and not know how to support them. And like you're saying, one of the biggest things that I've learned about on this journey has been harm reduction and methods of helping those who suffer perhaps cope as opposed to just trying to will them to stop cold turkey because that doesn't work for everybody and recovery is not one size fits all.
No, it definitely isn't. I isn't, sorry, and I love that you say that though, because it really isn't a one size fits all thing. Everyone's recovery is different. My recovery is going to be different, person A, B, and C. And I love that you say that because it's not all about just going to meetings and meetings like some people think. It's there's harm reduction, like you said. That may be for some people, especially coming off the harder drugs and stuff like that, like heroin, meth. and those types of things. That's why we have these safe supply sites and stuff like that for these people to use and those types of things. And I think we need more of those around and stuff like that,
Yeah.
especially for the people on the streets and the homeless and stuff like that.
I spoke early on in my show. I spoke with an activist here in New York named Ryan T. Carson. And over this past summer, he actually walked across New York State to raise awareness for overdose prevention sites. And when I spoke to him, I had never even heard of an overdose prevention site. And I was like, that it from an outside perspective, it sounds very odd because if you're not educated as to the method behind it, you would think to yourself, well, wouldn't that encourage people like, oh, here's a cool place I can go just shoot up and get high. And when you really think about it and get down to the crux of the matter, I'm not a heroin addict. I've never tried heroin. Just because there's a safe place down the road for me that encourages people who do use heroin to go do so in a safe, clean environment doesn't mean that I'm going to finish my breakfast and pick up and be like, all right, I think I'll try heroin today since now I can do so safely. It's not there to encourage
No,
new
it's not.
user.
And I like that you say that though, because it really isn't there to encourage it. It's there, whether it's a safe supply, clean needles, it's a safe, you feel safe in this environment. There's nurses, doctors, whatever there, in case someone does overdose, they have the Narcan there and stuff like that too.
Mhm.
And we have these sites up here in Canada as well, and they're popping up more. And they have harm reduction teams that go around the community as well and stuff like that. And those are the things we need. Stop knocking these people that are still out there using because you don't know their story. You've never been in their shoes either. That's what pisses me off with people that have never been in someone else's shoes, especially in the addiction world. You don't know what they went through yesterday. You don't know the trauma they've been through and stuff like that. So until you know their story, you can't really say much. Put yourself in their shoes and have a day in their shoes.
Perhaps empathy is a huge thing. So perhaps you don't even need to put yourself in their shoes, but perhaps just imagine for a moment that this person is someone that you love. Because honestly, Chris, for example, when we talk about finances, people always say you should have enough money in your savings so that God forbid you have one big emergency, it's not going to wipe you out. So you want to get to a point where you are more than just one emergency away from complete financial disaster, right? You don't want to be living on the streets. It's the same thing with addiction. We are all in a state right now where no one is untouched by depression, sadly, even sometimes suicidal ideation. We're all going through it right now so hard. I think for the first time as a world, we're really starting to understand we're just one catastrophe away from the end of things. So when it comes to addiction, think of it that way too. You could just be one devastating loss away from picking up the bottle and never putting it down, from picking up the needle and never putting it down. And then you're just like the person that you're passing by on the street that you're looking at and you're afraid to go near. Why? Because they might be a little dirty, because they might look a certain way. You can't think that way. You have to consider what it would be like if you were that person or if someone that you loved was in that situation. What would you do to help? And that's what I'm starting to lead my life with more of now. What can I do to help so that other people who I love don't have to suffer?
I love that you say that too. It's nice that even if someone going through depression, anxiety, or whatever, ask them, lead with what can I do to help or support you today? If there's anything I can do to help and support you, I am those types of questions and stuff like that. And I learned those things through therapy. It's funny, I learned them through therapy because for the longest time, and I'm still working on empathy because I didn't have an empathetic bone in my body for the longest time. I really didn't. I didn't know.
Empathy is hard.
Yeah, I did not. It is a skill, and I'm still working on it to this day. Like it is, some people, oh, you're very no, working on it daily. You have to really work on it daily and give a daily reprieve to everything that you've done in your past, and not worry about the past and stuff like that, and live in the present moment. Empathy is fucking hard. I don't know about you, but I have a
Yeah.
tough time with empathy some days.
Some days, yes. Everything is
Anger likes
hard.
to creep up more than empathy.
Yes, anger is easier to reach for sure. But again, it's almost the same thing. It's easy to reach for something that we think will numb how we're feeling. The hard part is putting in the effort to find out what we can do, again, to strive toward just becoming a healthier version of you. My dad got to a point a couple of years back where he actually he did something similar to what JT Wahlberg did. He stopped drinking very suddenly and started hallucinating and became extremely ill and actually suffered a small stroke where he couldn't speak for a couple of weeks. And I was terrified because I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to hear the sound of my dad's voice again. And thankfully, as you mentioned before, he was set up in his retirement with health benefits and things that helped us get him into the appropriate physical rehabilitation center and to the appropriate people who could help him regain his speech and all of that. His hallucinations were crazy. He was seeing things. He thought men were coming down from the trees outside his house. It was bananas. But these are the things where my dad was at a point in his life where he probably never could have fully stopped drinking. But if I could have said to him, here, look, what is it that we need to do to lessen the amount perhaps that you drink daily or weekly or whatever, so that you feel like you're comfortable, like you're not constantly in a state of shock and detox, but you're healthier. Because the point of the matter is that sometimes an addiction is just going to be what it is. And it really honestly might last forever. But if we can help our loved ones get to a point where they don't feel judged and criticized and they feel like it's okay to come to you when they're not having such an easy time of it, that's the goal at this point.
100%. Let's circle back to the anger thing.
Yeah.
What are some things that you do when you feel anger creeping up, Chelsea? What are some things like that not trigger you, but like how do you like suppress your anger so you can turn it into empathy or something like that? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I haven't nailed it yet. For example, I am the worst person to be in the car with. My dad was a professional driver and he taught me to drive at a young age. And I love cars and I love driving. I have really bad road rage when I see people who are less adept doing really dumb shit and I start flying off the handle. But then I have to say to myself, either my kid is in the car and I really need to reel it in, because it got to a point where when he was little, I was saying fucking go so much behind the wheel. He was like a baby. And all of a sudden he would start being like, he would copy me. And I'd have to say, oh, no, mommy's saying froggy go. Like I had to disguise what I was saying because it was getting so bad. I would just lose my temper so easily. And I have to remember, I have a little person in the backseat. I have a little mind whose job I have to shape appropriately. And I can't be flying off the handle like this. It's not cool. So when I find myself in moments of anger and frustration, I really just, it sounds corny, but I literally close my eyes. I take a nice deep breath in and then exhale out. And I say to myself, listen, this person might be cutting you off because perhaps they have an emergency that they have to get to right away, or something is just going on in their life. You don't know what it is. It could be horrible for them. Again, I try to put the face of someone I love on the problem, and 100% that helps me say, okay, calm down, because you don't know what someone else is going through. And in 10 seconds, my anger is lessened.
I love that you say that because a while back with my therapist, she said the same thing basically about road rage because I'm no better some days, but if someone cuts you off or if someone, cuts in front of you or speeds by you and those types of things, maybe they're late for work. Maybe they're having a worse off day than you are. Maybe they're having an emergency. You don't know what's going on in their life today and you'll never see them again. So just leave it be and let it go.
Except that they don't know you. It's not a personal attack. They're not like, oh, there's Chris, let's get him. They were just trying to go about their day. So just let them, and peace be with you and all that good stuff, because that's all you can do. You can't fix stupid, as Ron White used to say, the comedian.
Exactly. So where do you take a mental health conversation once you've opened with, how are you feeling, Chelsea?
So it depends on the situation, honestly. Mental health is something that I personally struggle with as well. I have pretty much struggled with it all my life. As I mentioned, my parents divorced, but they waited until I got married to get divorced in 2009, and they finally made it official. I grew up with parents who were amazing individuals, a horrible couple. And since I was little, I can remember begging them, please get divorced. Please stop arguing. I can't take it anymore. This is not worth it. And that anxious attitude and that sense of trauma followed me into my adolescence. And I had a lot of physical trauma happen to me when I was in my early teens, which carried on into adulthood. I was always hyper aware of my dad's alcoholism, all of these things. And then late in my teens, I started developing a really tricky relationship with food. I started becoming super aware of how I looked in comparison to other girls my age. And comparison is something that I still struggle with today. So when I'm speaking to someone else who is struggling with a mental health issue, I want to specifically see if we can find out, well, what do you remember what started that feeling? Or can you think of things, situations that put you right back into those feelings? So it goes beyond just how are you feeling into what makes you feel that way the most right now. And how my therapist actually said something to me yesterday that was really interesting, which was everybody always wants to offer advice, but it's very rare when someone says to us, how would you fix that? What do you think is the appropriate approach to how you're feeling right now? And that's actually it might sound hard to address it that way, but I find that it's actually a really good conversation opener. And honestly, Chris, it had never dawned on me to think about how I want to fix something for a change. I'm so used to absorbing other people's advice. Isn't that weird? Like, we don't really think about our own approach to things after a while.
No, for sure. Or another approach too, if you're having an argument or something, what is the solution here? What is the solution? You
Yeah.
don't need to hold on to things forever and ever either. Well, there's always a solution to things, whether you two can come up with something together, if it's with your partner and stuff like that. But I love your analogy and insights there. I appreciate your filling me in there,
Yeah. Listen,
filling us all in.
I am a hot mess on most days. I thank my husband all the time because he's immensely patient. And it takes me by surprise a lot because I know that there are days where it's the same thing with grief. You can be going about your day and all of a sudden you'll smell a scent or you will hear something or you'll see something and you'll just get knocked backwards with pain and wanting that person to be there, wanting to pick up the phone and be able to call them and tell them about it. And it's the same thing with trauma. Your trauma monster will come out of nowhere some days. And there are times when I will literally pick a fight with my husband and rope him in until he has no choice but to argue because I'm feeling a sense of trauma and it needs to be let out. And being aggressive toward another person is the only way that I can think of to do. So, recognizing patterns like that, being aware of them, and saying, like you just said, in the heat of an argument, okay, what do you want to do to fix this right now? And actively listening to the person's response and going from there.
100%. And I love that you bring up grief too, as well. Because sometimes, like you said, when you're angry about your trauma or grief and stuff like that, the other person on the other side, and I had to learn this recently too, like they may be yelling or getting upset, not at me, but with their tone of voice or what they're doing, but they're not really angry at me. They're just angry
Right.
because of other things that have happened recently, whether it's someone passed away, animal passed, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That they're not angry with you, or you're not angry with your husband. And I'm sure he realizes that though too. You have a lot of things going on inside you, and But once, like, someone can realize that it's not always you or the other person that you're angry with. You have things going on inside you that you're trying to deal with as well, and this is your way of dealing with it at the moment.
Exactly. And also asking people to like, what's something that would bring you comfort right now? If I bought you a cup of tea, would that help? If I gave you a hug, would that be okay? Sometimes the smallest things or finding out maybe something that cheers somebody up and sending them a small package of their favorite candy or something. It means a lot. Actually, I have another podcaster friend of mine sends me really nice, quote unquote, love notes in the mail, and she's so funny and good like that. And she'll cover them in stickers. And it's so simple, but getting mail makes my year. I get so excited. So sometimes finding the little things that we can do for each other can really make all the difference.
100%. Find those little things that make the other person happy and, feel loved and stuff like that. If you just show and make someone feel loved, it goes a long ways for sure, Chelsea.
But also, if I may, too, social media is something that I struggle with all the time. I didn't have Instagram or any of that until I started doing the podcast. And I find Instagram so hard to deal with some days. And I don't blame anybody who needs a break, because when you have a personal Instagram and you see all these people that you either actually know them in real life or know them now through the platform, comparison is unavoidable. You'll see your peers who are in your age bracket buying homes, and you're like, why haven't I been able to afford to buy a house yet? People are having babies, and maybe you struggle in that way. And you're like, why am I the only one that doesn't have a family yet? Or people, in my case, my issue could be this person has a child, and 10 minutes later, they look like a supermodel. Why can't I achieve those goals? Comparison is so hard, and it can really eat away at your mental health for sure. And that's something I'm still working on tackling too.
I love that you bring up social media and stuff. I don't worry about the numbers anymore. As long as I put stuff out that I feel is of
Yeah.
value to people, I don't care what happens. If I felt it was, good to put out and had value, that's all that matters. And I leave it at that. I don't even go looking. I just upload my podcast and I don't even look really on, like, the only time I see the numbers when I go to upload the next one. That's it. Like, I don't go looking every 5 minutes or whatever, like
Oh God,
some
no.
people do. And that can really mess with you. And you're doing the podcast for the wrong reasons. And if you're worried about the numbers, just so you know, as long as one person's listened to it, the message got out there to me. So that's all that
Exactly.
matters to me. It doesn't matter if I have thousands of listeners. I'd rather have a few solid listeners and building a community around me like that. I could care less if
Mhm.
I had 100,000 people that follow me on social media platforms or whatever. That doesn't bother me. I'm not all about the numbers anymore. I'm trying to work on the whole image thing too, comparison thing. I have troubles with that sometimes too, but I just got to remember that I'm me and they are them, and that's
That's it.
and I'm always gonna be Chris, and they're always gonna be Joe or whatever. And Chris is not Joe, and Joe is not Chris.
Exactly. We all have something to add to the pot. And what I love about the podcasting community specifically is that I have not met one unsupportive person. Some people really like yourself go above and beyond, but everyone collectively has been just a massive help and a massive support. And there's room for everybody. It's not a competition.
There's a
I
piece of
love
cake
that.
at the top for everyone.
Yeah.
There really is. Which one of your deep inner longings have you been ignoring?
I can only pick one. So my goal has always been to get to Yosemite. I'm a huge outdoors person.
Oh,
And
nice. I love
yeah,
outdoors too.
I was supposed to go in the spring of 2020. And obviously we know how that went. So it is my goal perhaps to do it this upcoming summer. But I have always wanted to just get out and live outside for a couple of days and just disconnect. That's my dream. But it has to be in Yosemite. I need to see a
Nice.
redwood tree.
Nice. Yosemite out in California there.
Yeah.
I've never been either, but my brother's been there and he took some pictures the one time. And I remember he sent me these pictures of his little tiny little rental car that he had beside, like, right beside, or maybe it was going under because there's some that have fallen over, but they've basically created like little
Yes.
tunnels to go
Bridge.
under
Yeah.
over the road. And he sent me this picture and this tiny little car that he rented, this little like Toyota or something.
This
And it's,
what?
like hundreds of years old, if not
Yeah.
thousands of years old or whatever. And he said it's just unbelievable out there, like driving down the coast.
Ah,
He did the whole West Coast. He drove
the
basically,
peak.
yeah, he did that, but he drove out to visit our brother that lives out in Western Canada. But he
Oh,
did
wow.
East Coast of Canada to West Coast of Canada, then down the West Coast of the States, up to
Wow.
Arizona and back. But so
That's a road trip, buddy.
yeah,
I need to hang out with him.
he just did that on his own. He disconnected after things were going on in his life. He took a leave of absence from work and just went and did his thing and just disconnected basically and just went on a trip by himself.
Amazing.
And he didn't plan anything either. That's the
That's the best.
ironic thing. He just
Yeah.
wherever he got to, he didn't matter where he got to. If he only got 50 kilometers and wanted to, like the one morning, I remember he told me he woke up and he could hear all these like sounds and stuff. This is in Oregon, so on the Pacific coast there. And he woke up, he like walked through the bushes. He was sometimes sleeping in parking lots and stuff like that in the back
Oh,
of the car.
no.
Walked through the bushes, and there's like hundreds of seals just
Oh,
and
wow.
they had taken over these like this boat marina. They had to move the marina down the coast a little bit
Ah,
because these seals for a few years had taken over this marina, like hundreds of them. And he could just
wow.
walk up to like these seals one morning. He sent me this video. It was just amazing though. Like he walked through the bush and then there's just hundreds of seals all over these docks and stuff like that.
Oh my God. See, but those are the experiences that feed our soul. They really are these magnificent, cool things. The funny thing is, when you're in your office or you're going about your day at work, traditional work, nature and all of these things are still going on around you. Like nature doesn't give a frick about number crunching and the things that we do on a daily basis that really mean nothing at the end of it all. Like these gorgeous things are happening beyond our purview. And we really need to take time to absorb it. Yeah, that's really cool.
I know being out in nature is amazing. Like I love fishing as well, and I want to get back more into it this year. Just being out on the
It's
river.
relaxing.
It is just walking the river. I used to love doing it before I, quit doing drugs and everything, but I just bring a few beers and a couple big joints and just the way I went on the river. And but it's peaceful today even too. Like I remember everything now. And just taking in
Yeah.
that nature, watching the ducks float by or whatever, just going down to the park or the river just to watch the ducks or whatnot. It's just amazing what you can take in and have that clarity and just remember those good times and stuff like that. Or bringing your kids along for that walk or that nature hike and stuff. There's so many amazing trails around where I live too. So
Yeah, that's the thing. The other day it snowed here and I was able to bring my son to a hill in the neighborhood I grew up in where I was sled with my dad. And that was our first time doing it together on this particular hill. And it was cool. It's always cool to recreate those moments and those traditions. And just if there's nothing else that I've taken from this god awful pandemic, I've actually been able to stop and absorb the seasons as they change. Like my dad would pray for blizzards. Like he was such a little kid and he loved to play in the snow. And I always hated it. And now that I'm able to work remotely and enjoy my surroundings a little bit more, I appreciate it. And I actually go out and take walks in the cold more and breathe in the air and recognize the differences between each season. It's important. And for a mental health perspective, it really feeds you. And it sounds corny maybe to people who don't often spend time in nature, but it does. Try it. I promise you'll feel more centered and it will help.
I love that you say that too. And a recent guest also said the best form of meditation if you're going out, like don't even bring your phone. Don't bring your headphones to put anything on. Just enjoy nature, take in everything. And that's the best form of meditation if you're going for a walk. Like you don't need it. Just disconnect that way. Walk down on the trail and
Yeah.
enjoy and just take those picturesque moments in and remember them in your brain.
Yeah,
You don't always have to
absolutely.
take a picture or anything. I love that he said that though too. And just like don't worry about the music or putting anything in your ears. Just go for a walk without anything. Leave that phone at home.
I don't know how people do that either. When I run and I hike constantly, and I could never do it with something in my ears. Also, it's dangerous, especially if you're a female, because I can't tell you the amount of women that I've actually run past and scared the life out of because they had headphones in and didn't know that I was there. So I could have easily, if I wanted to, attack them or whatever, and they never would have known it. So please, just don't do it. Leave the earbuds at home and listen to the birds. They're the natural singers.
I love that you say that. Just before we finish up here and stuff, I got one last question, but
Yeah.
what scares you of growing older and why?
Honestly, Chris, not knowing who I am, forgetting things. I'm sorry. I'm going to take a minute. So, my mom actually suffers now with early dementia. Apologies for the sudden onslaught of emotion,
No worries at all.
but that's been tough. Despite the fact that they were separated, my parents remained best friends. And I think my mom was actually the last person to see him alive. And the trauma of losing him, her memory was already starting to shake a little bit. But the trauma of losing my dad really just pushed her over the edge. So I watched this proud Latin woman who always carried herself with such ferocity through little by little diminish and retreat into kind of a shell of who she once was. So that's what scares me the most, knowing that there is the possibility that one day I might not remember. It's frightening. It's frightening for sure. So that's why I do the best to collect myself and kick my own butt sometimes and just realize that certain things are not important. They just aren't. Those that we love could be gone in the blink of an eye. And we need to remember there's so much beauty in the life around us, and we need to hang on to that. So again, forgive my emotion, but that's been a hard topic for me lately.
No, I totally understand and I can empathize with you. I can with that, with the whole, no, with the dementia thing.
I'm teasing.
No, I know. But I know my dad's uncle had it and it went downhill very quick.
Yeah.
And he was in his late 80s or whatever, but he finally succumbed. My mom's brother-in-law, same thing, my uncle, he has it now and he's in his I think late 60s, early 70s. But
Right.
even when I saw him at my aunt's funeral recently, and I said, "Hey, how's it going, Uncle Brian?" And he just looked at me like, "Who the fuck are you?" That's
Right.
pretty much what the words were. He was always a cursor. But he just then the worker that was with him, because he lives in a home and with the stuff that was going on with my aunt and stuff like that,
Yeah.
so that but he doesn't remember too much or too many people. He does the odd time or whatever, but it's crazy just to see the deterioration and stuff like that though too, and go from having beers and doing whatever and
Yeah.
while not remembering who anyone is really, or even his grandkids, I think, and stuff like that. So
It's so hard. And like I said, my mom is a very strong woman. She's a very strong willed woman. Our relationship has not been perfect at all. I love my mom. We've definitely had our differences over the years. And just now knowing that there are parts of her I will never know because she just can't access that anymore. So I would encourage everybody to, if you can and if you have the opportunity, try to get to know your family members, especially the elderly ones, as much as you can now. Even if you want to just sit down and ask them pre-written questions and maybe record it or something, but just have those talks.
that's a good idea. I like that you say that. Maybe I'm gonna go sit down because I still have one grandparent alive. I have
Oh, you
my
should get the
my
history.
my mom's mom she'll be 98. No, she just turned 90. She just turned 97 or will turn 97 in a week. And my dad's stepfather just passed away. He was 100 last year. So
Wow. You
you know,
won't be sorry that you asked. What's the
no,
worst that could
no,
happen?
exactly. Like that. It's maybe I'll have to go do that. That's a good idea. I remember my brother telling me some things that he'd asked my grandmother that he never knew and stuff. He'd go over and have conversations and.
And from a mental health standpoint, it will probably mean a lot to that person because
Oh yeah,
they're
she loves
special.
seeing people too, especially at Christmas this year when she was just by herself, dropping off that meal to her and stuff that, that she makes them feel welcome and makes them feel happy and stuff.
Well,
But
thank you.
you're very welcome. But before we go, where can everyone find your show? Where can they find you on Instagram, social media? They can
Okay.
follow you. Everyone, though, head over to the Stiicky Eddie podcast. Leave a 5-star review for Chelsea here. She does an amazing show. I've been on one episode as well of her show, and I know other people that have been on it as well. Yeah, go over and leave a 5-star review. A review for it really helps the shows and us content creators and podcasters help us grow organically. But yeah, take it away and let them know where you are and stuff like that.
It sure does, and thank you so much. I've had a little bit of a problem with Apple because I'm not an Apple user, but I'm getting up there, and also I'm getting on Good Pods as well. So those are two places that you can leave reviews for me soon, hopefully. Catch me on Spotify and Pandora, iHeartRadio, all the other platforms. I am there. The Sticky Eddie Podcast is available on Instagram, and you can email me at stickyeddiePodcast@gmail.com. Again, there are two I's in sticky. And I'm pretty sure that's it. I don't do the other socials just yet. So Instagram is really the best place to DM me, I feel like.
Thanks again for coming on the show. It was a very heartfelt
Such an
message and
honor.
story. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do that, Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Chris. I couldn't be more happy to be here. Thank you again for inviting me.
You're very welcome.